Okay, well, I'm Endres. I'm a project coordinator with PennFuture. PennFuture is Citizens for Pennsylvania's Future. Specifically, I'm a project coordinator with our Energy Center, which is a division of PennFuture that deals specifically with renewable energy, energy efficiency, and issues related to the Public Utilities Commission of Pennsylvania. A little bit about PennFuture. And first of all, I'd like to just thank the Green Building Alliance for inviting me to speak today. The focus of what I'm going to be talking about today is generally on renewable energy in Pennsylvania, and not the energy efficiency component of our work. As far as renewable energy goes in the built environment, it's becoming an increasingly bigger component of beginning of building life considerations, long-term plans for LEED and other green building sort of attributes. So I really appreciate this ability to blend discussion of renewable energy with the Green Building Alliance and their agenda for the year. So a little bit more about PennFuture. We are a statewide nonprofit advocacy organization. We have offices in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and Wilkes-Barre, and we do a lot of work on land, air, and air and water issues across the state of Pennsylvania. Sort of a through line through all that is energy. Energy impacts all three levels of the sort of environmental considerations. So our mission in the Energy Center is really to address and provide a framework for Pennsylvania to move forward with policies that will enable renewable energy regulations that support further growth of renewable energy and energy efficiency and other items in that sort of realm. Today I'm going to specifically talk about an effort that we've undertaken in the last year called the Clean Energy Winds Policy Roadmap for Pennsylvania. We saw an opportunity for Pennsylvania to really dig down to the right policies for energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies in Pennsylvania. So I'll just go into the mission of the Clean Energy Winds campaign is to provide a nonpartisan education to candidates for governor, policymakers, and the public about economic, job creation, and environmental benefits of clean energy, and identify practical policies that can be implemented to realize those benefits. So we're really talking about a roadmap of practical policies that Pennsylvania can implement in the near term to get us further along in our renewable energy goals and building a renewable energy economy for Pennsylvania. So the sort of bullets of this effort were to develop that clean energy policy roadmap for Pennsylvania, and that's now a complete document that we have available for you, and I actually have copies of the executive summary for everybody. Provide that nonpartisan education to gubernatorial candidates and policymakers about the roadmap. That should result in increased clean energy business advocacy and increased policymaker and candidate understanding of clean energy benefits and the solutions. We can't assume that our policymakers know what we know as a community of folks that deal in these sort of issues. So we have to go and aggressively educate those policymakers. And then a final side effect is just increased general public awareness, which is sort of this element today. I think folks in this room have varying degrees of understanding, some very technical, some pretty technical, and some maybe just a sort of a book or published paper understanding of things. So getting the public to understand where we are and where we need to go is an important component of this. So I want to talk about where we've been and what's brought us to this place in Pennsylvania so far. And the landmark piece of legislation for Pennsylvania is our Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, our AEPS, which was passed in 2004. And it's noteworthy that this was a piece of legislation that had bipartisan support. It was introduced by Republicans with as many Republican supporters or co-sponsors, if you will, as Democrats at the time. And what it did was it basically said that 18% of our electricity needs to come from alternative energy resources by the 2020-2021 compliance period. So that's broken into, and notice that I emphasize the word alternative energy, okay? Because there's two tiers here that are of consequence. Tier 1 which is 8%. That's the renewable energy component of our policy. Okay, so that's the wind, that's the solar, that's small hydro. You see tier ones here. So these are the technologies: low impact hydrothermal, geothermal. All is in that 8% of tier 1. Okay, there's a tier 2, which is 10%. That's the alternative energy, not necessarily renewable, but alternative. That's waste coal, what they would call distributed generation systems. These are sort of the demand response generators that kick on at certain times. Large-scale hydropower, municipal solid waste incineration. Let me see. That's also landfill gas capture. Okay, so there's these 2 tiers here. Okay, and this policy, this 18%, it applies to your EDCs, which are your electric distribution companies. That's the Duquesne Lights, okay, and the First Energies and the PPLs and all those companies. And it applies to the EGSs. Those are the electric generation suppliers. Those are our new guys that come into the market and maybe call you and say, hey, I'm selling electricity at a cheaper rate. They're the direct energies. They're the Viridians. They're the Green Mountain. Okay. But this policy applies to both of them. So they both have to have this proportion of electricity from these sources by that 2020-2021 time period. And it's ramps up. It's not like they have to have that 18% this year. So here we are. These are the different compliance years. Okay, and we're now into this sort of compliance year. So by now they should have 5% to 5.5% of tier 1. There's a separate carve out for solar, and I'll get into that. And then they should have about 6 to 8% of the tier 2. You can see it ramp up. So every year there's more that's required that they buy, so that it continues. Or it's supposed to stimulate a continuous drive towards these clean energy goals. So I just want to take a step back. So this is a really good policy. We were actually one of the first states in the nation to enact a renewable or an alternative energy portfolio standard. Many states followed suit after us. Okay, and generally in other states these are called renewable portfolio standards, not alternative energy portfolio standards. Okay, and a lot of them are just renewable energy. So here's PA, right? Here we are, we're 18%, right, by 2021, and we did a little asterisk. Where's our little asterisk? Our little holy cross here. It includes non-renewable alternative energy sources. But look at our neighbors. New York, no asterisk, 29%. Ohio, 12.5%. Where's my Maryland at? At Maryland, 20% by 2022. DC, 20%. So let's be glad that we have the policy that we have, but let's recognize that we're falling behind other states. Other states have become more aggressive in these policies than we have. Okay? So we have some work to do. So solar, in particular, in our RPS, actually has its own carve-out. All right? So we have, I want to demonstrate this because I want to make sure everyone understands REX a little bit. So you folks who are on the phone, you're going to be missing out on a little element here. All right. So you're going to get a REC. Indigo, you get a REC, SREC. Okay. I'll give you a tier 1, tier 2 credit. Okay. So basically, the electricity companies this year have to have so many SRECs. So who has my SREC? Okay. So Indigo. 2 years ago, you installed solar on your home. Congratulations. Okay. And every year, Indigo produces a certain amount of electricity. Okay. And for every megawatt of electricity that she produces, she gets an SREC. Okay. So Indigo, what are you going to do with that SREC?
I think maybe I'll sell it to a conglomerate.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe Duquesne Light comes along and says, well, I have this requirement that I have to meet certain under our AEPS. And I need credits, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and buy that credit from Indigo, and I'm going to pay you right now. Actually, I'm going to pay you $40 for it. Yeah, it used to be a lot higher.
Well, I didn't have my solar on my roof.
That's right. So I'm going to pay you $40 for this SREC, and that's going to help you pay for the system that you install in your home. And every year, maybe I'm going to buy as many of those as I can from Indigo, or maybe I already have enough, so I'm not going to buy them. Or I'm not going to buy them from other solar. So within our ATS, we go 0.5, 1/2 of 1% carve out for solar, okay? Phil here has a rec. It's just a rec, okay? So that means Phil, maybe Phil installed a small hydro system, or maybe he's got a windmill, okay? But those technologies aren't, there's not a wind rec or a small hydro rec, or what was one of the other ones in our tier 1 here, or a geothermal rec. It's just a rec, okay? And so Phil, I'm doing like, I need recs, all right? I'm going to buy this rec, but right now, I'm going to keep that $7 worth. Okay? But you produce a lot of them, okay? Maybe you have a big wind farm, so you're producing a lot of recs, all right? But still, I'm going to buy this one rec from you. Yeah, okay. So how about, we got tier 2, right? So I'm doing light, I got to have maybe some waste coal in there, or some distributed power, municipal solid waste. Who's got just a regular credit? It's not a rep, right? Because it's not a renewable energy credit, but it is a credit. Who's got that? You got that. And what do you have, sir? You got some, actually that looks like waste coal needed. Actually, you know what? Butane lights always have enough waste coal. I don't actually need to buy that credit from you, just so you know. And very seldom have I bought that credit from you. So the tier 2 actually isn't stimulating any growth in your technology. It's already sort of included, with the exception of wood pulp. They're the only ones that really benefited from tier 2. It's a paper byproduct. All right, so you're going to hang on to your credit, and actually a lot of those companies just hang on to their credit. So does everyone get that sort of illustration? Okay, great, cool. So maybe you understand a little bit of credits more. So an interesting thing about credits, though, is that they're supposed to represent the environmental benefit of that power, okay? So when you sell them, you know, and folks that are doing like things like Living Building Challenge or something on this line, just maybe a consideration. When you sell them, you're really selling the sort of clean benefits of that to the power company. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of debate about whether you can claim that you're actually a green facility then, or how that goes. Now, a lot of sort of certifying organizations have made consideration for that and maybe change the rules a little bit, but it is part of the debate. You know, what does this credit mean when you sell it? Does it mean you're not as green anymore, or does it just mean that you're deferring to the mix of the power company? What does that mean? So that's a sort of a debate or a question. Does anybody have any questions on RECs? Okay, cool. This can get a little bit heavy sometimes, so I appreciate that. So anyway, again, we're not doing as good as other states, okay? We have the solar requirement. This is a big issue right now, okay? This is what we managed to do in the last few years. And keep in mind, our solar industry, and we have some representatives of our solar industry here, has really only been around in Pennsylvania for about 5 years, 5-6 years, okay? And in that amount of time, we've made tremendous progress forward. We now have installed in PA over 200 megawatts of solar capacity. That's remarkable, okay? So that's that blue line in the middle, all right? Now, the problem there is that this is the actual SREC requirement. So remember when I told Indigo that her SREC was only worth $40? It's actually dipped down way lower than that. It's been as low as $8. I don't know, Phil, anything else to say about that? How low have you sold SRECs where it is? Phil's a solar installer by trade, so.
So I've actually sold them for $7.25.
Okay, so they've been doing this, and right now they're spot trading at 40. That doesn't necessarily mean that people are getting 40 for them, but they're spot trading at 40. Okay, and that's because basically our solar installers have done really well putting in way more solar than not that we need, but than is required on the grid. All right, so that's going to play into some policy things I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But remember this graph because it's important. All right, there's also a green line here. This is the total of solar installed combined with the credits that are eligible to be retired in PA, combined with both PA in-state capacity and out-of-state capacity. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more later. Okay, so and to compare that to solar carve-out, there are other states that have a specific solar carve-out like we do, and again, we're being beat by our neighboring states. Okay, New Jersey has a 4.1% solar carve-out. New York has a little bit less than us, but it's a customer-cited carve-out, and that's going to become a little bit important later. We have 0.5%. Delaware has 3.5%. So again, other states, other neighbors that we're sort of, I don't want to say competing with, but are trying to capture economic benefit in these industries are enacting more aggressive policies than we are. okay? Wind, okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. What we've done with wind in Pennsylvania is really great. We have a really good wind story. We have about 24 separate wind farms. This is a map of them. You notice most of them are in the Somerset Mountain corridor there. You pass them when you drive on the turnpike. Some up and around northeast PA. And then actually these green dots are actually supply chain. We have also used wind to our advantage to start manufacturing. We've had some manufacturers leave. Mesa has closed up their facility, moved it out to Kansas. We've had some other sort of starts and stops, if you will, in wind. But in general, we've done good, but we can do better. So clean energy benefits. Back to why we need more aggressive policies. Job creation. Greater job creation potential than fossil fuels. Okay, we get more jobs out of investments in renewable energy than we get jobs and investments in fossil. Okay, clean energy sector growth rate. They're high quality jobs in existing fields. So, what were you doing 15 years ago?
I was working for a trucking company.
Okay. All right, but you have skills in the electrical background, right? Yeah, correct. Okay, and those apply really well to solar energy.
Yes.
Absolutely. So these are the kind of stories we hear. So I probably went back too far, but yeah.
Not that way.
Yeah, right. There's a consumer's cost savings. Okay. Clean energy actually reduces electricity prices. The more renewable energy we have on the grid, the more price certainty we have. And renewable energy can be expensive to install, but production is free. Okay, we're capturing those resources. When wind goes onto a grid, it's the cheapest energy source. It's cheaper than gas. It's cheaper than coal. It's the cheapest thing. They take it first. It's the cheapest. Okay, and that drives down prices for everybody else. And then energy diversity. That's a hedge for the future. The more variety we have in our energy mix, the more we're hedging against future price influxes from gas, from coal, that kind of thing. Okay. And then, of course, our public health and environment. We have a vested interest, and we know this story really well in Western PA because of our ability to quantify the health impacts of air pollution. The more coal that we get, or the more we stop burning coal in a dirty way, some people say that, we can, the cleaner our air is, the less we have to invest in health and the environment, okay, and the better the economic situation and outlook is for that. So clean energy benefits are many, and they need to be considered. Okay, so wind energy recommendations. This is where it gets a little thick. But back to this wreckage. Okay, we haven't had any new wind farms go up in Pennsylvania for I don't know, about 18 months. We have a few in the pipeline. I think there's 3 or 4 actually in the pipeline. And the problem right now is I'll talk a little bit about our ATS policy, but the problem right now is these RECs. Okay, and not that they can't sell these RECs, but they can't lock in a long-term contract for these RECs. Okay, so wind facilities are expensive to put up. It requires them to gather lots of different kinds of backers and financing. They need to have guaranteed offtake of the electricity, and they need to have guaranteed long-term contracts for the RECs. They need to be able to say that I'm going to sell this REC at a guaranteed price to one of the electricity companies or EDCs or ETSs for a period of time so that I have revenue coming in. That's going to say to my financing backers that I have the revenue that I need then to build this project. Right now, our EDCs and ETSs are not buying these on long-term contracts. And that is putting an absolute wrench in the development of new solar, in new wind in Pennsylvania. Okay? So the reason that our Duquesne Lights and our other competitive suppliers aren't buying RECs in long-term contracts is that Pennsylvania has this competitive market, right? So I talked about the fact that you could shop around, right? The Verdi's come to the door, or the direct energy's come to the door, and really they're trying to sell you the generation portion, right? The generation, not the distribution, but the generation portion of your bill. Duquesne Light, okay, doesn't necessarily know how many customers they're going to have next year, or 2 years from now, or 4 years from now. That number changes all the time for them. So when they're trying to buy enough wind recs to meet their requirement, which is a percentage of their overall load, they're saying to renewable energy supporters and other policymakers that I don't know what my load is going to be. So how can I sign a long-term contract for those recs for a guaranteed period of time and when I don't know how many customers I'm going to have? That's what they're saying to us. Okay? So this recommendation here is all about that. What we're trying to do is tunnel through those concerns and get to what we call centralized procurement of recs. So we can still get those long-term contracts in, all right? But we find a way to remove the risk from the Duquesne Lights of the world, all right? Does everyone understand that? Basically, what we're going to do is centralized procurement can happen two ways. We could say a government entity of some kind is going to manage the long-term contracting of these recs, or Duquesne Light can buy all the recs that they need on long-term contract or their customer load, whether they're going to be Duquesne Light customers or a competitive customer later, and then auction those recs back out to the competitive suppliers, so that we don't lose that ability to capture these large quantities on long-term contracts. The other important thing is to point out about that is that a long-term contract saves ratepayers money. There's a cost to comply to our alternative energy portfolio standard. And when you buy recs on a long-term contract, okay, that is a cheaper and more, more predictable way to figure that cost into your ratepayer. So there's a cost. So this is the number one thing that we're trying to do for wind right now, is to try to figure out how we can get centralized procurement of recs on long-term contracts, despite these concerns that the utilities are saying that they're not buying on long-term contracts because they don't know what the customer is going to be. Questions on that? Please.
So who set up that program? Like coal lobby?
No, actually, that long-term contract is a result of our AEPS, our Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. The utilities have to buy a certain amount of wind for compliance.
But why isn't it put in the original portfolio?
Well, because it wasn't a problem when that standard was passed. Yeah. So a legislative fix is one way, and that's sort of what we're advocating for. We want more wind. We got to get this long-term contract thing figured out. Okay. Yeah.
Who monitors the recs market now?
The PUC does, and PJM, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, is our grid district. Okay, they both have a bit of a role in monitoring the retirement and registration of workers. Okay, so that's sort of the big thing on wind right now, and I wanted to sort of carve through all this sort of thick language, but it's good to reference back to. So yeah, require centralized procurement of recs and allow those, and if it's centralized procurement by the Duquesne Lights, the distribution companies, then allow them to find a mechanism for them to auction those credits back off so there's no net loss to them. We have some issues, some additional issues with, and somebody please watch me on time here. We have some other issues. We need some transmission upgrades. We need PJM interconnection to do some things. We need better planning on transmission. So the recommendation there is to develop a transmission planning working group, and you're going to hear a lot of talk about working groups in these next few sections. And then finally, back to that AEPS. That's when, as far as levels of importance to the wind industry right now, that's when they say, oh, and get us more, a better renewable portfolio standard with a hybrid farm. But that, for the wind industry right now, their first and foremost concern is that long-term contract. The solar title is missing. So solar policy. So I guess I'll just start off by saying that when I started working on solar issues in 2011, I think we were number 3 in the nation for solar jobs. We had about 7,500 of them that they were able to track. Last year, in 2012, I can't remember what year that was, I'm sorry. Yeah, in 2012, we were about number 5. We had 4,000 jobs. We lost jobs. Okay, and then 2013 was the last time they benchmarked it, and we were down 229. So we have a steady decline in solar jobs. Meanwhile, other states For instance, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and I can't remember the last one, but they're all in the top 5. So they're Northeast states, and they're in the top 5 for solar jobs. There's absolutely no reason why we should have slipped out of the top spots. But I just want to give you that primer. We're actually on a downturn in solar jobs in Pennsylvania. So solar policy recommendations. Our solar share within the APS is weak. Okay, I showed you that map. We have other states that have higher requirements. We need to improve our APS. We need to be more aggressive in that requirement for solar. So what we're recommending is amending the alternative energy portfolio standard to require that at least for the following percentages. So remember, our policy stops at 2021. We're now proposing that we stretch out to 2030 with a 3% requirement. That's still not as aggressive as some other states, but as far as making a pragmatic suggestion of where we can go in the near term, that's where we sort of settled. So it's not really an arbitrary number, and you'll see some of the job growth from that, but it is important that some states still have much more aggressive policies than even what we're proposing as an improvement over the policies that we have right now. Border issues, SREC border issues.
Do that one, SREC. You go have an SREC.
Okay, so I showed you this graph that had the SREC oversupply. Let me go back so you can see that again. Okay, this has been a big issue that we've been working on for a few years, and Phil's very familiar with it. But basically, we're oversupplied in SRECs. One of the reasons we're oversupplied is we accept out-of-state SRECs. Other solar markets don't accept other out-of-state SRECs. Okay, so a solution to this problem. So Indigo's got this SREC. Indigo, you now live in Virginia, and you have that solar installation. I'm Duquesne Lake. Okay, and actually, you only live in a little bit of Virginia. Okay, but your state doesn't have a portfolio standard at all. It never has. But I'm Duquesne Lake. Okay, I'm going to buy your SREC. Okay, moreover, you're going to be more than happy to sell to me because you were never guaranteed SRECs at all. I mean, your state doesn't have a market, so all Virginia SRECs are going into Pennsylvania. Okay, we are the market of last resort. We have no border around our market, so anyone can sell into our market. That's helping to create this oversupply of SRECs. I want to note, though, okay, even without that oversupply, okay, this is the out-of-state SRECs. This is the out-of-state and in-state compliant. Look where we are here, okay, and look at the in-state. We're still oversupplied, okay, even without that out-of-state issue. All right, this has been a really contentious issue, and believe it or not, I am not advocating for a border closure, and we do not advocate for border closure in our policy statement. And that's counter to maybe what a lot of advocates have heard over the last few years, but I'll tell you why. Get back to my solar section. Okay. So we don't have a border. We don't say Virginia can't sell into PA. Our law can be satisfied with solar recs from out of states. Okay. But if we put a border on Pennsylvania, if we say no SRECs from out of states, that law will be challenged in court based on something called the Dormant Interstate Commerce Clause. Okay, and we've seen these challenges before. Basically, what will happen is some interest will try to challenge that law, and it may or may not pull up in court. But aside from that, a better solution to this problem may not be just closing the borders, but instead to institute what they call a deliverability requirement. When you looked at that map, I pointed out New York had a distributed energy requirement. So not just an SREC requirement, not just a requirement for solar credits, but a requirement for distributed energy systems. Okay? If we institute that kind of requirement as an amendment to the APS, then we could stimulate growth of distributed energy systems the same way a high-priced SREC would, without bringing up all of those issues with this interstate commerce clause. Okay, and that is Colorado's approach. That, as you saw, was New York's approach. Many markets that have really robust solar markets facilitate those solar markets through distributed energy carbon. So it may be a solution that is much more palatable to the makeup of our legislature. That doesn't raise those interstate commerce concerns, that may be more durable over time. And that's what we're concerned with. We're concerned with a border closure not being durable enough to sustain our solar energy industry because it would be challenged in court and could fall. So that's sort of the prime solar border kind of solution in our Clean Energy Wins report. I'm happy to take questions about that now. Okay.
Do you know why or how people might would come to purchase an abstract from someone from another state rather than someone in Pennsylvania? Do they know who they're buying from?
Not necessarily. So those serve as an aggregator. A lot of estimate purchases are done through aggregators, and maybe as an aggregation company, they'll have two goals. One, service customers and get them some liquidity from their RECs, but also get a price on those RECs that is going to be taken up by the Canadian. So if I'm a Virginia customer, I'm probably going to accept a much lower price than maybe a Pennsylvania customer. So that automatically is maybe going to make those a little bit more attractive than PA SRECs. But again, yeah, they're being bundled together. An SREC is an SREC. When we start talking about distributed energy or carve-outs or border issues, then they do get they would get a specific sort of note on or some other tracking mechanism. I don't know if Phil, you want to say anything else about that?
It's all depends on what state your solar array is certified in. Like I can put up a solar array in Pennsylvania. I can certify in Pennsylvania. But I can also certify in Ohio. Because I have to certify in Ohio or solar arrays into Ohio. Much like they have to certify theirs into Pennsylvania if they want to sell them. So, and really in PG and gas, they don't really say, yes, it's a PA right? It just says, yes, PA, check, and yes, Ohio, check. In your case, you need Virginia check. So, there's really, you really don't know what you're on.
You're saying that the state that sells the abstract to us needs to be certified in Pennsylvania in addition to their own.
Right.
Or
the system or the aggregator. So.
Oh, or the aggregator.
The aggregator, say an aggregator from Ohio is trying to sell us rest
okay.
All that system is in Ohio.
Yeah.
The system itself has to be certified in Pennsylvania.
So if we're the market of last resort, almost it would be wise if you're serving a client in any one of those states that's in PJM to certify your system in that state and in Pennsylvania, and that's what we've seen.
But is there a cost of certifying your system besides in Pennsylvania? No, there's no cost. In Ohio, they usually require that you notarize the cost, and in Ohio, their paperwork takes about 6 hours to complete. PA, if it's a PA to UPS, it's only about an hour. So at one point, I was registering everyone that I installed in Ohio because I'm going to have a higher asset value. And it was worth it for me to do that. However, now they become oversupply also. It's $40, $45, so it's not really worth it for me to spend 6 hours to pay my time to certify that array in Ohio.
I'm just wondering, as a Commonwealth, if you say the tax, right, you certify your state, maybe it's no fee, but if you're certifying out of state, the fee is Pennsylvania fee.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all those things have. So there's two things at play here. One, there's the appetite of the legislature to address the issue. Okay. And then there's another layer of concern about interstate commerce. So we had a bill. We all pushed very hard for a bill in 2011 called the Solar Jobs Bill that was supposed to design to fix this problem. Okay. Where the buck stopped with that bill was concerns about interstate commerce. Okay, so those are stated concerns that the legislator has said they do not want to run the risk of. Now, other states have no problem trying to testing sort of like, I guess, testing the limits of interstate commerce. New Jersey is a completely closed market. And I mean, New Jersey's border could be challenged in court. It happened in Colorado. It happened in Michigan. There's now talks of it happening in Ohio. These challenges, legal challenges, do happen. What sounds practical to renewable energy advocates, though, is always going to be, what do you want to say, more than directed by the appetite or what would be accepted by the legislature. So that, again, back to why we're pushing for a deliverability requirement or a distributed energy carve-out within our ETS versus a border closure really speaks to all those sort of nuances of political ideology, concern about interstate commerce, and general appetite to do anything at all about this problem. Okay? So our recommendation is to include a requirement that electricity suppliers procure a certain portion of RECs and SRECs from Tier 1 distributed generation sources that are customer site. Okay? So that would put a premium on rooftop solar, that would put a premium on even distributed wind, that kind of thing. All right? And that's just solving one problem, or it could solve one problem. It doesn't solve that wind SREC or that wind long-term contracting issue. This is all about trying to stimulate solar in Pennsylvania. And I should say that we don't necessarily say a portion of RECs and SRECs from Tier 1 solar. We say distributed generation, but as a component of distributed generation, solar is overwhelmingly an overwhelming proportion of distributed energy. So out of about 10,000 distributed energy systems in Pennsylvania, over 7,000 of them are solar. Okay, so this would, even though it doesn't specifically say this is for solar, this would have the result of stimulating solar. All right. So other issues. So Phil has served as an aggregator. I talked about long-term contracting for wind. There's a component where we could do better about facilitating SREC sales for customers in Pennsylvania. We're seeing right now in Delaware a state-sponsored public auction of SRECs. Basically in Delaware, what Indigo could do is she's a Delaware solar owner, is that she could go on a website and actually bid her SRECs into a large sort of auction, if you will. And her SRECs are going to be aggregated with a lot of other people's SRECs, okay? And she will get a price that is settled upon from the electric companies guaranteed for 7 years, and then that price steps down for an additional 13. So Indigo is going to get a 20-year contract, guaranteed liquidity for her SRECs for a certain period of time. This is something that we don't really have in PA. Liquidity for SRECs is an issue. I think Phil would agree as an aggregator. You have customers with SRECs in Pennsylvania that those SRECs are just sitting there. They don't know what to do with them. There's no easy way. They weren't educated maybe by their installer in an appropriate way. So figuring out an element of centralized auction or some sort of public portal could be something that's really good for Pennsylvania. So we're going to continue to look at that Delaware model to see if there's potential for Pennsylvania. Again, the caveat of that is that we have to have a healthy solar market to really have demand for those RECs. Otherwise, this doesn't necessarily come into play. But that's a recommendation that we're making. And it's sort of, I think it goes hand in hand with that notion of wind REC centralized procurement. So other policy recommendations. We had a sales tax. I probably won't talk about that, but we had a really great program in the state. It is part of the reason why we had a bit of an oversupply of SRECs beyond the ATS. We had an additional incentive, which was the PA Sunshine Program. That distributed $111 million in funding to systems up to 50 kilowatts, so residential and small commercial. And this was really a good program for both PA residents and in stimulating growth of new installations for installers. But this December, we exhausted that. It's finally done. There's no hidden funding stream left. For many years, we were having start stops where PA Sunshine would close, and then we'd find money, call backs, or it wasn't distributed properly or something like that. We'd find a few $1 million. That's all over. We have no other funding for PA Sunshine. The program is not going to come back unless there's some sort of act in government by which funds it again. Okay. So with that, the last year it was tiered pricing. It started at $1.25 per watt, stepped down a couple times, and for the last really 2.5 years, it's been at 75%. What is it? It started at $2.25. Oh wow, I don't remember that. Okay, I will fix that slide, Phil. So it started at $2.25. So people got on the ground floor of this, really got a really great incentive. But when this program started, solar was also a lot more expensive than it is now. Commercial PV, 50 cents to 75 cents per watt. Anyway, this was so an example of this would be if you had a 6,100 watt system, so this is a 6.8 kilowatt system, and it's probably around about the average size that you see today in a residential, maybe a little bit higher. They'd have a $5,600 rebate, which is a pretty significant rebate. The only caveat there was that rebate could also be taxed as income, which is kind of silly, but you know, it's like the government gives you money and then takes a little bit of it back, but hey. That's where we are. So one of the things that we're proposing is a dedicated stream of funding for the PA Sunshine Program. Maybe not at the levels that we've seen in the past. We don't necessarily need a really robust rebate program, but something that stimulates leads, something that stimulates you know, just a little bit of the incremental cost could go a long way. Even if it's down to 25 cents per watt, could still go a long way. So we're advocating that we explore those kinds of things. We explore a sustained, predictable program that's guaranteed year after year. All right. So away from our policy recommendations, I'm going to talk a little bit about net metering. This is something that's come up recently. Net metering. Who here was at Fred's presentation last couple weeks ago? Okay, a couple of you. So Fred probably talked about net metering. Net metering is the mechanism by which solar owners or other distributed system owners get the full benefit of their system. Okay, I like this picture. This is a really clear picture to show to people. So here we go. It's daytime. Okay, but the people in this house are probably at work. Okay, and they're not using a lot of electricity, but their panels are turning out kilowatts. So that electricity is going back through their meter and onto the grid, and their meter is running backwards. Okay? At night, our folks are home. Okay? They have their video games and their computers and all that stuff on, and they're feeding back from the grid. Okay? So their meter is turning forwards now. So you're getting the net effect of that day generation and that night usage. Is everyone clear on that? That's how net metering works, and it's a fundamental policy. States that don't have net metering do not have distributed energy. They do not have rooftop solar. They don't have small. They just don't have it. It's the first step to getting these kinds of things in your state. So we actually have pretty good net metering in this state. We even have virtual net metering, okay? Which is basically what our virtual net metering allows is for, let's say I'm the University of Pittsburgh and I have lots of meters, okay? But they're all under one bill. I pay the meters for all those bills. But I have what do I have? Maybe I have a mechanic center, like a garage service center. But I have a lot of room space on that center. That building doesn't use a lot of electricity, but I'm going to put solar on that electricity, okay? The building that uses electricity is my classroom building, okay? So virtual net metering allows you to aggregate those meters and get the net benefit of that system that's on the garage, even though it's feeding into maybe its own meter, and apply that benefit to the classroom building. All right. Not a lot of states have virtual net metering, but our virtual net metering only applies to a single customer. Okay. So I have to be the University of Pittsburgh. I can't be the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Duquesne or Duquesne University share one solar installation. I can't do that. Okay. And I have to have the meters have to be within 2 miles of each other. Okay. So I'm the University of Pittsburgh, and I have facilities all over the city and probably all over Allegheny County. You know, that has different facilities. I can't do it for a facility that's 2 miles or more away from that solar installation. Even though I own all those meters, I can't do that. So there's some practical limitations. You could consider how beneficial that can be to like a farmer, right? Farmers have lots of buildings and they tend to have maybe disjointed tracts of land, that kind of thing. So that's a really great benefit. But really what we need, and how many of you have heard of community solar? Is that something you've heard of? Yeah, you've heard of it, okay. I always call it meter aggregation because there's a lot of ways for a community to invest in solar that's not really the right definition of community solar. Community solar, if you see this image, it's like, here's a solar farm, and here are your panels, but here are your neighbor's panels, right? And even though this isn't on your property, you're still benefiting from that solar. So basically what we need to do in Pennsylvania is take that definition of virtual net metering and make it more robust. We need the ability for me as an apartment dweller to buy into a solar installation and benefit from that solar installation directly on my bill. And that should do a lot to increase the amount of solar we have. Colorado does really well on this. They call it their community gardens law. But we need more robust virtual net metering or meter aggregation considerations in the state to get there. We're just not quite there yet. A group of citizens can all invest in some way in an installation and maybe reap some financial benefits from that investment. And there's some groups in this area that are exploring that, but there's no way for me to get the electricity from that one installation without really buying it from maybe a competitive supplier that's paid a lot to put that system in place. So the reason I bring up virtual net metering is this. Right now, so I'm talking about how we need more robust net metering and virtual net metering, but right now our PUC has proposed some pieces of legislation that actually water down our net metering a little bit. So actually, we've undergone an effort with a lot of coalition members to try to address the changes that the Public Utilities Commission has put forth. None of it is particularly, I would say, like malicious in any way or designed to attack solar, I don't think. But what they're doing is adding more uncertainty, a lack of clarity, and putting some limitations that we think are just completely unnecessary. So away from our sort of clean energy wins agenda, protecting net metering rights and protecting the net metering rights we have and moving us towards a place where we have more robust net metering is a sort of an important goal for the next 4 to 8 years. It could really go a long way to get us some more solar. So some examples of the changes that they've proposed are, they are saying that they're clarifying fees for net metering, specifically for virtual net metering, but in trying to clarify, they're actually opening up the language in a way that we think is really dangerous, where a utility could actually levy fees on anything, not just a virtual net metering customer. So they're stating that that's not their intent, but when you actually analyze the language, and again, I don't think this is malicious. I think it was unintentional. When you analyze the language, it could be interpreted so broadly that you could have an additional net meter fee levied on customers. So we really need that. They're putting a limitation of 110% on all systems. Right now, we only have a limitation of 110% on virtually net meter systems or third-party owned systems. Okay, and that 110% rule is really unnecessary. We already have a 50 kilowatt upper limit for residential and a 500 kilowatt upper limit for commercial. There's no reason to impose additional limitations. And if they do have somebody out there that's trying to maybe game the system, although there are very few financial benefits to gaming the system and overproduce, they should be addressing that on a case-by-case basis, not handing down rules that create more hurdles for solar and distributed energy for everyone. So that's really the crux of this effort. And we're encouraging renewable energy businesses and energy professionals to comment to the PUC. And then we also have a petition that our friends over at Sierra Club have sponsored for the public. So that's an example of an effort that we've undertaken recently to protect net metering and try to make it more robust. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Where's my PowerPoint? So one of our recommendations is a few working groups for solar, and not from Yanni. Oh boy, sorry. One of our recommendations for solar is working groups. We have some issues that don't necessarily need to be solved by legislation, but could be solved with some facilitation of sort of statewide resources. And one of them is zoning and permitting for solar. And PennFuture, with some other partners, undertook an effort a few years ago to develop appropriate zoning and permitting for solar energy. And this is the website. And basically, there's links to all kinds of resources for municipal officials. And keep in mind that our Commonwealth, municipalities have a lot of control over things like zoning, permitting, and inspection, unlike some other states that have centralized county authorities that do that. So Phil, as a solar installer, residential solar installer, was up against a patchwork of different rules and regulations. He could go 200 yards in one direction and have a completely different fee, even though those customers were neighbors and best friends. And really, so streamlining that process is an important goal, I think, for solar in Pennsylvania. One way to do that would be the governor's working group. Now, we've had governor's working groups in the past, but we didn't know then what we know now. There's a lot more research. There's more than just, we have the sunshine team here in Western PA. There's now an effort in Philadelphia to do the same thing. And we've all learned and engaged experts. There's a great deal of expertise. And there's also 5 years, 6 years of lessons now from the industry about how to do this appropriately, and from municipal officials about their experiences with solar. So it's really time to restart some working groups, government-sponsored working groups. So maybe the governor's working group on solar zoning and permitting, governor's working group on energy efficiency. So that's what we're proposing in our CEQ. Yes.
So this thing has a lot of renewable energy.
Yes, but again, that was carried down under the Rendell administration, and we know a lot more. We have more activity, we have more expertise, so it's time to revisit those as well. The other recommendation that we made within working groups is, and this what do I want to say here? This applies to both energy efficiency and home-scale renewable energy. So residential energy efficiency and home-scale renewable energy. We're having a big problem in the state, and many states are having the same problem with valuation, property valuation as it pertains to renewable energy upgrades and energy efficiency upgrades. In California, there's some studies that were sponsored by the Department of Energy. Actually, the study is California and Colorado that illustrates a monetary premium on properties that have renewable energy and energy efficiency upgrades. Okay, in our market, those upgrades are not necessarily being recognized in home sale value, and that's a problem. Because when you're selling somebody as something that's going to take a few years to pay off, they need to know that if they have an issue where they're trying to get out of that property and need to sell that property, that they're going to see some sort of cost recovery in home sale that property. Right now, we do not have those mechanisms in place, and we need those mechanisms in place. And I can do a presentation just on this issue, but what we need is a working group on multi-listing services. Basically, that is the mechanism by which all property attributes are listed. It's the mechanism by which comparables are identified. And if we do not have green MLS listings in the state of Pennsylvania, then we do not have a mechanism by which to identify comparables with solar and home energy efficiency upgrades. Right now in the state of Pennsylvania, we have one MLS that is quote-unquote green, and certainly not the Western PA MLS. Keep in mind there are 14 of these, and they are privately managed. They are not government-managed listings, but they are the mechanism that drives residential home valuation. So what we're proposing is that the governor convene a working group that would bring these stakeholders to a single table so that we can get to the heart of this issue and start getting the mechanisms in place that we need for home valuation to be recognized, valuation on renewable energy, so solar installations, and home energy upgrades to be recognized, and for that to be, we want solar installers to be able to say with certainty that this is something you can expect. And it's not that those attributes don't add value to a home. It's that value is not being recognized by the mechanisms that we have in place in the real estate commercial. So we're proposing that working group. Do we have any questions about that? Yeah, again, so we saw this effort very successful in Colorado, a state working group on MLS and home valuation, very successful in Colorado. We have a great model to follow in that. They did a lot of education to real estate agents and MLS managers. They got them all at the same table. They got them talking about what it costs them to upgrade their list, these kinds of things. Okay?
They also had small.
They did, yeah, they did that, and private, not necessarily. So another example would be Chicago. Well, so Chicagoland MLS actually only is the listing for Chicago with Cook County. Okay, so the way that list got green was a little bit of, what do you want to say, a pressure from certain government leaders. They brought those guys to talk about it, but they had a little bit more of a geographic area that was contained in only one MLS. So they have a green MLS in Chicago as well. Okay, so I guess the last thing I just want to talk about, and I think we can go into maybe just some open conversation, because again, this stuff can get kind of thick. But I wanted to talk about what it would mean. So basically, what we did was we crunched some job numbers on what jobs we could expect from an improvement in our AAPS. And again, that was a recommendation for both solar and wind. It wasn't the top recommendation for wind, but it was a top recommendation for solar. Basically, we used a model called the Endres Job and Economic Development Impact Model, or JEDI model. That is kind of cool. I like JEDI. And it includes a metric for labor, services, materials, and components, so ancillary services. It doesn't include jobs from real estate or finance. And I just want to point out that we used some conservative factors when we inputted into this model. So our determinations are somewhat conservative, but they're still pretty compelling. So we used lower than average GDP growth, and then we used lower than average per capita growth to project these job numbers. And what we got was, so if we did our existing APS, this is what JEDI said we should exceed: 13,469 construction jobs, 61% in solar, 208 ongoing jobs. And that's about in line with the projection that we see right now. You know, and it's some of the jobs are temporary, some of them are diversified companies, mechanical companies installing solar for a period of time, which is about in line with it. But if we did an enhanced APS, if we just brought that APS to 20% tier 1 with a 3% solar carve-out by 2030, then we could see 92,000 construction jobs, 12% wind, 88% in solar, and 1,232 ongoing jobs. So keep in mind, those construction jobs, right? Construction jobs are one project to another. You know, arguably a solar installer is a construction job, but they could have that construction job for years and years at a time, right? The ongoing jobs would be more the ancillary services, the operations, maintenance, that kind of thing. You know, we know that if we do this, if we improve this APS policy, we could see job numbers, and these job numbers rival some of the most aggressive job projections for fossil fuels. So having this component in our energy mix is really an important thing for the economy. Any questions on that? Again, it's modeling. It's a little bit ethereal, but you know, it's not the modeling that and the data that we have for the existing policy is not that far off what we've actually seen beyond. So there's a compelling argument to be made there.
So you're saying you're offsetting the wind by solar when you enhance it here?
Well, and keep in mind, we're taking that solar carve out from 0.5% to 3%. There's a lot of jobs created by installing solar.
But part of that will be offset from the wind market, though, right? It looks like the wind market will take a hit.
No, the wind market would not take a hit. Because you're still you're 13,000 versus 9,200 jobs. So as a proportion of this number, yeah, there's less wind than there would have been, but there's not less wind overall. So yeah, there's a lot going on here, and this is interesting. We did do a business survey. Keep in mind, this entire clean energy winds platform was informed by working groups in various, and I probably should have said that in the beginning, but with various working groups. We had an energy efficiency working group. We have a whole section on energy efficiency, and it's a good thing I didn't try to fit that in because it would have been tedious and brief. So we had a solar working group, we had a wind working group, and these were both state and national inputs that we got. We had PACEA, that's the Pennsylvania Solar Energy Industries Association. We had CEA National Solar Energy Industries Association. Solar Energy Industries Association. Is it of America? No, it's not America. For wind, we had a WEA. We had inputs from various companies, wind companies in Pennsylvania, and then for energy efficiency, we had a whole laundry list of energy efficiency. The Association for Low Carbon Economy, our energy efficiency ACEEE had, and I just want to make sure that you guys understand that we did this. These aren't PennFuture's ideas; these are ideas of coalitions and groups of industry professionals. So, but we did do a survey, a business survey, and we asked the question what the barriers to growth were in Pennsylvania. And the number one thing was uncertain regulatory policy at the state and local level. That was the one thing that renewable energy businesses and energy efficiency businesses said to us, is that we need to have market signals that are consistent and not all over the place like they've been in the last 10 years. Uncertain regulatory policy, and then some competition for customers, difficulty scaling the market, lack of skilled workforce. There was sort of a laundry list of other barriers, but none of them were statistically significant. A majority of the respondents identified expanding and increasing renewable energy requirements as a primary policy. So that's a message from the industry. Again, it wasn't the first thing on the win list, but overall, it was the most important thing that Pennsylvania could do. I don't want to get too far into this because this is what's going on sort of right now. We have hearings tomorrow and on Friday where the EPA is collecting public input on the new carbon rules that are being carried down. But it should be recognized that this has implications for renewable energy. There are the way that states comply with this rule are not just by limiting carbon coming out of the smokestacks of various fossil fuel industries, but also by doing things like adding more renewable energy efficiency programs. So there's a really positive side effect from Pennsylvania's if they have plans to comply in a certain way that includes incentives for renewable energy or more robust programs for renewable energy and energy efficiency. We could see a great deal of positive impact from this regulation. Yeah, it's federal regulation. This is how the state complies with it, and there's a sort of a menu of different ways that states can comply with these. I mean, some of it's going to be limiting carbon out of the smokestacks, but there's also elements that I can say, hey, Pennsylvania, if you institute a more robust renewable energy policy, then you would get more points towards your compliance with it. So it's going to be an evolving thing, but PennFuture is fully in support of this. This statute will be testifying to that effect over the next 2 days. So our conclusion is only Pennsylvania and their policymakers can determine if energy should be a priority in the state, clean energy should be a priority in the state. And given the benefits of clean energy delivers, we believe this should be a fundamental policy goal in the next 4 years. We have the path. These are the right policies for Pennsylvania. They're durable policies. They're achievable. Some of them aren't particularly grand, but they are policies that would do good for us in the immediate. So we have a Clean Energy Wins website. You can download a copy of the full report. You can sign the petition in support of these policy recommendations if you want to. And then you can receive updates on that campaign. And if folks want to give me their email today, I can add them to any number of lists that they would want. The other thing that PennFuture has that I think is cool is we do a blog digest. We put out about 4 blogs about different energy efficiency and renewable energy issues in Pennsylvania, not just necessarily our local market, but in Pennsylvania in general. And but we have quite a few readers to that blog series, so that's something you want to be signed up for. I can certainly arrange that. The other thing I wanted to show you, which I think is kind of cool, is because this is a visualization that we don't necessarily have out to the public for a few reasons, but I wanted to show you this because this is all the solar installations. Actually, this is about 95% of the solar installations that we have in Pennsylvania all on one map. And this is cool because I don't think anyone's, there's a few GIS mapping projects that have done this, but the cool thing about using the Google tool is that you can narrow down your neighborhood and actually see, some different kinds of installations. The colors are actually not important, so don't pay any attention to the colors, but if you see the amount of solar that is in eastern PA versus western PA, there's significantly more solar in eastern PA, which sort of informs efforts. Why is that going? Oh, I'm zooming out, that's why. sort of informs efforts that we've seen in Western PA over the last few years, of which PennFuture has been involved in some of, and others are sort of moving forward on their own, of really trying to get our solar market a little bit more mobilized and folks a little bit more educated on solar. So efforts that Sun WPA and various projects are undertaking to make sure that happens. Fred, who's a solar educator with Sun WPA now. So I guess, a good question would be why so much more solar in Eastern PA than Western PA? What would stop you people, or what was stopping people? I guess an important thing to say is that even absent some of the robust incentives that we saw, PA Sunshine at a higher SREC prices of solar come down so much that you're starting to see an evening out of those business propositions for customers, even from just a couple years ago. So a solar installation without incentives can be as attractive as a solar installation with incentives from a couple years ago, because that price has come down so much. When I started working on solar issues with PennFuture, we saw $790 a watt per install, $825 a watt installed, and people were installing them. And now we are down to, depends on how big the system is, but $425 per watt installed for systems under 10 kilowatts, down below 4 for systems over 10 kilowatts. Remarkable decrease in cost. Okay. Okay, Carl, what scale?
Just a quarter of 40K.
40K, 3, yeah. So it's cheaper by the dozen mentality for sure, but because there's fixed costs. There's fixed costs in the solar installation, and there's costs by volume of solar installation. I'm sure Fred will know that, so I don't want to get into that. But again, we have this phenomenon, and we really need to, as the business proposition for solar gets more appealing, even with new incentives or even without new incentives, just because the market's matured so much. How in Western PA are we going to work together to make sure more people that want to do this or think it's a good idea are connected with the resources that educate them, that get them, to the installer, that make them understand that it's not, that it doesn't work here. That's not the issue. How are we going to get there? So this is always a good map to illustrate. And then the other great thing about this tool is we can always bring this up and say, oh, well, you think there's no solar in Western PA. Well, there's actually probably solar near you. You just don't know it. And then we're able to bring up this map and show them, oh, hey, yeah, there's an installation less than a mile away from you, or oh, did you know your neighbor down the street had solar? So again, this doesn't have all the installations, but it has a majority of them. Let's see, where are we? South side. So let's go ahead and zoom in real quick on our south side of the show. You're not on there because you weren't PA Sunshine, but I'm going to create a marker for you. I had a really great intern work with me this summer, Pete Stalter, and he did all this GIS. And doing it on Google is a little different than doing it on a GIS program, but I'm going to make sure CCI is added to this. Keep in mind that this map is not necessarily posted for the public yet.
So this is all just PA solar, so other installs that might be for PA solar.
No, it's all PA Sunshine. It's all the installers. It's all the installations that were funded for PA Sunshine.
Okay, Sunshine.
Yeah.
Okay, so the earlier installations are on there.
Not necessarily, no. So you can see that property. Actually, you see the two panels right there. It was kind of fun to see different. It's always cool to bring up FIPS and some of our other and CCI. CCI's got this cool from space. It looks like sort of like the three sisters of solar. And we can zoom over there a little bit. But anyway, it's a good visual to make the argument that there's solar here in Western PA, and there's certainly solar in the state of Pennsylvania, and it's here to stay.
What about the solar thermal? Do you count that?
Some of them are on there.
There's one on Phillips, and there's two down by facilities on this.
Oh, right. Well, you guys know actually. You guys know where they all are, so we need to cross-reference to make sure that we get them all marked.
Yeah.
This is Dennis Stradovich's house. He's been on our solar tour a few times. Yeah. Flango. Dennis Blanco. Volt owner.
They're both online.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, this is the one, if you're driving past it, if you're driving down the McCardle extension, you can actually see it from the road. But there's actually quite a bit of solar. It's, the Perry Academy Field is, or the Academy Field is right there.
Out there.
Yeah, so CCI would be what, just a few blocks over. Anyway, so we have a few minutes left. I mean, other things people want to bring up. I'm working on trying to get these kind of presentations to be a little less dense. So, feedback is appreciated. But, I guess there's CCI there. The message that I guess I just want to deliver is that, policy is an important component of renewable energy. And it's not because it's not competitive. We need incentives because other sources of fuel get so many incentives. If you were on a level playing field, maybe we wouldn't be having all this conversation. But we have robust incentives for fossil fuels in this state. We need robust incentives for alternative fuels, for renewable energy. I guess a lot of folks sort of roll their eyes. Oh, here's another renewable energy advocate talking about policy. Oh, they need more policy. When's it going to stop? Well, that's not a fair snapshot of the reality that we're working with. So the policy agenda, policy roadmap for clean energy is a necessity. It's an absolute necessity. And actually, we're going to be releasing in October a fossil fuel subsidy renewal, so you can actually see what that number is in Pennsylvania. We did a sort of a lighter assessment of that 2 years ago. And we came to the conclusion that Pennsylvania subsidizes fossil fuels to the tune of $2.8 billion a year to the state of Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, our solar energy industry was creating jobs and installing solar energy all over the state of Pennsylvania on a pigs comparatively. That's across the country. Well, and energy policy is really state by state. There are federal subsidies as well, but I'm talking about $2.9 billion just for state subsidies.
Really fast.
I mean, and some of those incentives are legacy. They are. They're from a time when, from a time when 30% of our folks were involved in those initiatives. It's time to recognize the job benefits of these people and put them on a level playing field.
Was there any regulatory hurdles or issues surrounding microgrid?
There are. Yeah, there are. There's no mechanism in place to declare a microgrid. Okay? If you want to draw a line around a block or a community and say this is now independent of the grid, there's no mechanism in place to do that. You're going to have to start from scratch.
Local municipality.
That's different. Establishing a municipal cooperative.
No, I'm saying you have to go through whoever your local municipality.
You have to go through your local municipality. You have to go through the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission. You probably have to go through the PG&E grid.
But you're not talking to a grid, so what?
I guess what I would say to you is that it seems like it should be easy, and there's a lot of talk now in Pittsburgh about microgrids. What I'm encouraging the stakeholders that are talking about microgrids to do is to early on reach out to regulators, really start a conversation with the public utility commission. We have a microgrid microgrids in Pennsylvania tend to exist in industrial properties where they own all the property. Okay.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that a microgrid could be many different owners of the property.
Yeah.
Right.
Cooperative.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that advocates of microgrids understand limitations, understand what you're going to be up against, and engage those stakeholders early so that you understand where. We had the same conversations with meetings where people were going down the road of wanting to share the benefit of solar installations without understanding the regulatory environment in which they exist. So that can be the challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying there's no mechanism in place to declare a microgrid.
The only thing I'd say is you're going to worry also about the sunk infrastructure costs.
Right.
Whoever's serving that area, some infrastructure costs to serve that area, and now you're going to go off grid with that area, then they're going to have to look for, just like a gas line, whatever, that's extended to that area.
Well, this is the debate we hear about solar and net metering, nationally. This is why the issue of fees come up, because a solar customer that's not paying any electricity bill, okay, is being considered as like a free ride, right? But of course, they're not necessarily including all the benefits of that solar installation is providing to the grid. What I would say to that argument is that we're certainly nowhere near the saturation point for renewable energy where that really needs to be a concern. I can see why, in an ever-changing electricity environment, you would be concerned about people that use the grid infrastructure to send their electricity back and don't pay for that benefit. But that should not halt the progress that we have today. But absolutely, for microgrids, that's absolutely going to be a concern. And that's where you could get into a mechanism where someone's saying, yeah, we'll put in a mechanism for a microgrid, but you have to pay all the stranded costs for all that infrastructure. And then all of a sudden, the conversation stops because there's no money for that group of, or that municipality to necessarily purchase that asset. But I'm not saying that's I mean, this conversation is relatively new, I think, in Pennsylvania. The microgrid that we have in the state is the Navy Yard in Philadelphia. And that border was created by military, right? So it always existed in this country. So I think it's an issue. The microgrid issue is something that we're going to be having to discuss as a community. We're going to have to be discussing it as in terms of strategies to make sure that the regulatory environment is there by which you can actually do. And of course, what is a microgrid too? That's the other thing. There seem to be different things to different people, or at least different degrees of aggressive infrastructure. Other stuff, please, anything. Phil, Phil, who else is an energy professional in the room? Phil's an energy professional. Okay. I mean, other things. I mean, come on.
I would just strongly recommend go to the PennFuture website, make your opinion known about on the legislation, not legislation, all the way down to the PUCs trying to push through, because they are kind of, some people say they're kind of insignificant. However, they are going to have a lot of impact on the solar industry, especially. I don't like the fact that on the virtual net metering, if you have one property here, one property here, they both have to have a draw. I don't think that that's really necessary. If the grid is there and you can tap it, we're tapping it on our own cost as part of the solar system. So why does there have to be a draw there? It kind of there's utility roughly to it.
Well, so specifically at that point, what we're doing, so we have this portal for comments that was designed just to make sure that industry professionals commented at all. Because solar installers in Pennsylvania are busy people; they work really hard. So we provided this portal, but we also have this coalition also has much more technical comments. And basically, what we're doing in that, what you're talking about, is actually we're challenging an interpretation of statute, the APS statute. Nowhere does it say that there should be two existing loads. That's not what virtual net metering says. So, and we're challenging the PUC on that interpretation. So you're getting into a very technical kind of thing here, but basically when I talk about that farm, right, a farmer has, maybe a barn, right, the roof is old. Let's just say the roof is old, the property is narrow, they have a property right across the street that's maybe not in production. Virtual net metering and the enabling policy basically says that they should be able to put a ground mounted system, even if there's no meter at that place. They should be able to say, I'm going to have solar on my property, and it's going to be virtually net metered to this. What the PUC is trying to clarify is a feature that basically doesn't say that. It says he has to have another building with a meter of existing load before he can think about putting that solar installation. Which is absurd, because we don't necessarily, that's contrary to the spirit of that provision.